following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio streaming and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Liana and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. Now this week, we're doing something a little bit different again. I've got Aquila from the Bubbleheads back, and Aquila actually suggested this topic. We're talking about mental health and guns. And Aquila wanted to start off telling everybody why this is important to her. She's concerned about seeming like she's pontificating from on high. Aquila, why is this important to you?
So back in 2013, I had just come back from my third and final deployment with the Army, and I got messed up because there was such a close distinction of what I was doing stateside versus what I was doing downrange that my brain had not processed the change. And I was sleeping with a gun under my pillow and a gun on the nightstand. And my wife, God's lover, was concerned. She knew that something wasn't right. And she asked probing questions, and she couldn't get to the bottom of it. And one day she simply asked me, "Hey, I see this. Will you get some help? I'm really afraid for you." And because we had built our entire relationship on trust and asking the hard questions, I knew that this was coming from a place of love. And so, because I trusted her, I locked my weapons up for, I think it was like 6 months while I went to therapy. And it turns out that I did have some PTSD that happened prior, got rekindled and mixed in with, and this was all before the Army. So it gets complicated. We don't have the time to get into it. So I went through that, and then it was another couple of months after that I was just like, you know what? I'm not going to carry. Let me get my head right. And then finally, after about 6 to 8 months, I put in for my carry permit again and went back to carrying a weapon on my off duty, because you do not carry on a federal installation. That's just bad news. But for me, having that weapon was a big part of my daily, what we call everyday carry, because I had just come from an installation in Louisiana, now formerly known as Fort Polk. I can't remember the name of its new name.
I haven't got them all down yet either.
But, my first time driving up to that installation, I was making a right off the main drag, and there was this family in a grassy area right next to the road. They were selling blankets, and all three of them were wearing KKK t-shirts.
Yeah.
So that freaked me out, and it became a matter of habit. I'm also a photographer, so carry lots of expensive equipment. So that was also a thing. And that story between me and my wife, that's really why I care about this, because there's a lot of suicide, there's a lot of stress, and there are a lot of guns out there, particularly here in the US. And it's not the big organizations that are going to make the difference. It's that one-to-one interaction of, "Hey, dude, I'm worried about you."
Yeah, and that's true of gun owners. That's true of non-gun owners as well. That doesn't that's good practice for everyone. I think people tend to get scared and go, "You have to do this and you have to do this or else," and that doesn't help in those circumstances.
Yeah, I was reading some Pew Research data, and one of the things that really jumped out at me was 73% of gun owners say they could never see themselves not owning a gun. And
Right.
to me, that says it's a really, that once people own guns, it really works its way into how they see themselves.
Now,
And
you come from a military family, right?
yes and no.
Right.
So my extended family is very military, have several retired officers in the family, and have the next generation of officers coming up. One just went off to West Point to join his eldest sister, who's going to be a graduating senior.
Mhm.
Go Army, beat Navy.
Okay. So it is, I mean, that is a big part of it. What is seen as normal in families is a big thing. It's people I know in multiple parts of North America, including Mexico, uh their family owned guns. Sometimes it's a shotgun. People who live rurally have a rifle, or usually a shotgun, to scare off bears.
Mhm.
It's not, it's just a big boom. It's not pointed at anything. It's not loaded with a bullet. It's just boom, go away bear. So that, I mean, that intergenerational thing is one thing, but one of the things I think for people around the world, because this program is carried around the world, don't understand. They only see I make the distinction between gun owners and gun nuts, and people associate gun anything with the gun nuts. Kid Rock shooting up a case of beer because he's angry about Dylan Mulvaney. That's the sort of thing that frightens people. Now, nobody I know who is a gun owner behaves that way, and everybody I know responds the way you did, kind of head in hand, shake head kind of thing. The US is fractured in a lot of ways right now, and relationships to anything are different, from region to race to socioeconomic class to family history. So tell me, and this is a very open-ended question, I apologize, but I don't want to lead here. Tell me about the gun culture that you came up in.
I I actually came up in a very anti-gun household.
Okay.
So my first contact with firearms was through one of my fraternity brothers. I went shooting once. It was not the best experience.
Okay.
My next contact with guns was um, my now ex-father-in-law, who took me. He was a major hunter. And let me just kind of pause here. There are three general umbrella categories when it comes to American gun owners. You have gun culture 1.0.
Mm-hmm.
They're your sportsmen, your
Yeah.
hunters, clay shooters, uh, collectors, that a gun is something to put food on the table or recreate with. It's not a big thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Gun
Mm-hmm.
culture
Mm-hmm.
2.0, which is where I'm at, is revolved around self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for transparency's sake, I am trans and I live in the southeastern United States. There are a lot of openly operating hate groups and a lot of threats to trans persons. So it's very, very, self-defense is a very real.
Well,
uh
you're also biracial, for people who
yeah
don't know. I mean,
uh
that's when you talk about the Klan, that's relevant.
yeah
Yeah.
and then you have gun culture 3.0.
Yeah.
3.0 is, they're the problem children, if you ask me. They're the they're I basically call that the gun nuts.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are shall not comply this and shall not, and it's like, really, dude, just
Yeah. Lauren
settle
Boebert's
down.
family running a gun-themed restaurant. Yeah.
It, yeah, I'm not even going to touch her with a 10-foot cattle
Yeah.
prod. I don't need that headache.
Hmm.
The gun culture you are that you came up in or that you identify with is actually going to influence what kind of weapons you're going to favor. Gun
Hmm.
culture 1.0, you're going to see a lot of revolvers, a lot of bolt action or lever action rifles,
Right.
pump action shotguns, maybe a semi-auto clay gun, but nothing really that people think of as tactical.
Right. Right. Which
Um,
is another terminology issue that we might get into later, but yeah.
yeah. So gun culture 2.0, you're going to see a lot more military style weapons because the idea is that if you're in a gunfight, you want a gun that's designed for a gunfight. That's going to be your AR-15s, your semi-auto pistols, generally chambered in 9mm, although there's, pick a flavor.
Now that this is to be intended to be used against humans as opposed to against deer or duck or something like that.
The handguns, absolutely.
Right.
The longer guns, particularly the AR-15, that is that's like the Lego of the gun world.
That's what I've heard. It's easily adaptable, especially for women, smaller hands, smaller people. If you can only afford one gun, that does kind of everything reasonably well. Is that correct?
Yes, and the great thing is that once you have an AR-15, the top half comes off, and so you can adapt that weapon
Yeah.
to any purpose. So there are cartridges. There's been like this whole cottage industry of creating cartridges to make the AR-15 the absolute most flexible weapon on the planet. You can go from 22 Plinken with 22 long rifle, which is a very
Mhm.
relatively weak rifle cartridge, on up to hog hunting,
Right.
depending on the caliber that you've got chambered, and everything in between. So it's a
Yeah. For
very,
people
very
who don't know, hog hunting involves big herds of wild hogs, right? Like people
mhm.
like, why do you need a semi-automatic weapon for hog hunting? If you've ever seen hog hunting, yeah,
Yeah.
it's dangerous.
For those that haven't, if you wound and don't kill the hog, it will charge you.
Yeah.
And their skulls are extremely tough. So you need a big, heavy bullet moving very fast to get through and actually kill the animal.
And they're an
Uh,
invasive species, right? Those herds need to be culled or it's going to become an even bigger problem.
if I remember correctly, Texas is now allowing machine gun hunting of hogs from helicopters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen the footage of that. It's it's mental looking. Yeah.
Uh, and if you've ever shot a machine gun from a helicopter, you know that it's not as simple as it sounds.
No, that's the problem. Is
Somewhere
yeah.
I've got a video of me trying to do machine gun qual from a Black Hawk from my Army days. That was absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, it's not like it feels in Call of Duty. So I mean, I think you've made a pretty good example of the three sort of different major philosophical groups, if you will, of gun owners, which is a good place to take a break. When we come back, we're going to continue talking philosophy of gun ownership, what gun owners get out of owning firearms, responding to the idea of nobody needs a gun. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, nottherapyshow.com. Join our mailing list or at Not Therapy Show on Twitter, Instagram, and now Threads. Aquila, hang on. We'll be back after the break. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. I'm still talking to Aquila from the Bubbleheads. And Aquila is a military veteran. She is a gun owner. And we're talking mental health and guns. Now, before the break, we were talking about the three major groups of people and their relationships to guns: the hunters, the clay shooters, the people who carry guns for personal protection, and then the people who treat guns as a lifestyle, for lack of a better term. I called them gun nuts, maybe that's a pejorative, but it gets the point across of the three buckets. Now, before the break, I said we were going to pivot to the realities of the U.S. having a Second Amendment and the rest of the world, well, large parts of the rest of the world, not having a similar constitutional structure. And I do think that changes and informs attitudes surrounding guns. Again, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, anything, at Not Therapy Show, you can fill out the contact form or go to at Not Therapy Show, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. Okay. Regarding the psychology, I think one of the things people struggle with, the thing I hear a lot, and again, I think this partially ties into America having a Second Amendment and most other countries not. Gun ownership is not seen as a right in the majority of the world. It is in America. So that's an important cultural distinction. But what I hear from people is no one needs a gun. You don't need a gun. How do you respond to that?
Well, my internal reaction is to throw the BS flag and throw it in a very rude and in your face kind of way. The way I look at it, and this is influenced by being a gun owner. What I need versus what I want when my life is on the line is none of your friggin' business.
Mm-hmm.
As long as I'm not in violation of the National Firearms Act, the Gun Control Act, the Firearms Owners Protection Act, or the Brady Bill, it's none of your friggin' business how I choose. Now, if you're on the receiving end of that weapon, okay, you got a dog in the fight. Most, and this is borne out by CDC, Whiskars, I think is how you pronounce it. That's their data set. Mm-hmm. If you go in and you look by fatalities, firearms are used more often in suicides than in homicides.
That's been a very consistent statistic for decades.
It moved from 66 to about 50% somewhere in the COVID years.
Yeah.
And that's because so many people are under so much economic and sociological stress that it makes people act in unusual and previously unseen manner.
Right. And I mean, the statistics get wonky because, for instance, people can find any statistic that don't agree with their point of view on any issue. So some people cite the statistic that Black people in the US are most likely to support gun control. They're the hardest hit by gun violence. However, the rate of gun ownership among Black Americans is also going up. And the reasons cited in those statistics are exactly the ones that you've given. It's a personal protection thing. It's the people who want us dead, own guns, so we have to have them too.
It's not just that. So we've seen borne out by video after video after video that many of the non-majority, we're talking Black, Hispanic, Asians, LGBTQ, cannot count on the police to do their job in a way that is fair toward those marginalized communities. So there's been a huge push to arm up various groups, because if we can't count on the police, and also there are a number of Supreme Court cases that say police do not have a constitutional duty to protect. They're only there.
Wow.
Yeah. So you could be getting stabbed in broad daylight. They have no legal or constitutional duty to protect you.
That's a
So
complete opposite to what it is up here. Our police cars actually say to serve and protect. It is the motto of the cops up here.
they used to say that down here in some
Interesting.
places. They don't anymore. In fact, there was a joke in a Transformers movies that just made me laugh to no end. It was a Decepticon that was masquerading as a Mustang cop car.
Right.
And the script on the back said to punish and enslave.
That's right. Yeah.
And down here, the law enforcement was the natural evolution of the slave catchers.
That's right. Yeah.
So that is, when people look at the United States, they really need to see that dynamic at play. And also, when you look at gun control laws within the United States, you have to understand that the first gun control act in the United States was A, race-based, and B, it predated the Second Amendment by almost 100 years.
Yeah, this is history a lot of people are not aware of. The fact that, costs of owning a gun, costs for permits, they're all nudge, wink, dog whistle aimed at suppressing gun ownership by Black people.
Basically, Black people are poor people.
Yeah.
And you see that in places like New York, where a $500 Glock may cost twice as much once you get through all of the requirements. And even then, you're not really guaranteed to get a permit.
Right. And I think people, if this is the nuance of the whole discussion that I think gets lost, and why I wanted to talk about it is, like you said, need is actually something of a red herring. The idea that, I don't need a PlayStation 5, but am I real pleased when people say I shouldn't have one? Well,
now,
no.
When people ask me, why do I need a gun? I'm thinking, all right, I may not need an M240 Bravo to defend my position. When I can technically do the same thing with a 9mm pistol. And yet, when you're in a combat situation, what do you reach for? You reach for that machine gun. Why? Because it's the most effective device.
Now, you've had a lot of training on firearms, though, as well. And I want to make sure I get this in for this portion of the discussion, because I know some people who clearly had inadequate firearms training but were gun owners. I know a guy showed up at his front door, refused to leave. The guy I knew, the homeowner, fired a warning shot into the air, and he was charged with a crime because it was unsafe discharge of a firearm. You're not supposed to shoot it in the air. But we see on TV all the time people firing warning shots, and that's wrong. You're supposed to aim center mass so you don't hit someone accidentally. That way, the way guns are depicted as opposed to actual safe ownership, that messes with people. There's the practicalities of owning a gun, and then there's the mystique of guns. How do you approach that?
Okay, before I go any further, let me just establish very, very quickly that the commandments of gun safety. Number one, all guns are loaded. I don't care if you've checked the chamber It's loaded. Treat it as such. Don't point the muzzle at anyone or anything you are not willing to kill or destroy. Number 3, never put your finger on the trigger until you are ready to shoot. Number 4, be sure of your target and what is beyond it.
Yeah.
Muzzle awareness. If you want to see me like absolutely go completely fucking nuts on somebody, show me somebody that doesn't practice muzzle awareness. And in fact, I was out with a now ex girlfriend, and this guy brought a hot weapon behind the firing line and was sweeping the crowd.
Yeah.
I lost my ish.
Because I mean, that's dangerous. It can go off.
And that's the point. If you are getting your gun safety from media, you are wrong. Full stop. No arguments. Do not pass go. You are wrong.
What's the requirement for ongoing safety training in your state?
There isn't.
There isn't. Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
Now,
so people may do the course. It's just like driving, right? You learn how to do it right, and then years and years and years and years, you slip.
Most people I know have a friend or a family member that teaches them how to shoot. And in fact, there's now an LGBTQ friendly group called Operation Blazing Sword. They are associated with the Pink Pistols organization.
Yeah.
They're a volunteer group of people that are proficient that volunteer to teach new gun owners, particularly in the LGBT crowd, gun safety and training.
Mm-hmm.
So that way they know that whoever they're interacting with respects them as a person and has the chops to teach them what they need to know. In Georgia, there's no safety requirement. There are no training requirements, even for a concealed carry permit. My state recently passed permitless carry, and I really want to address this one.
Okay.
So when I was changing my name, there was a gap of about 6 months between when I was able to change my name on my driver's license and when I could change it on my carry permit. So that permitless carry allowed me to continue to carry a weapon during that gap and secure my person. And that's the thing that some advocates on either side don't really talk about, of how that has the positive effect. And for somebody who's in transition, that may be the difference between life and death.
Right. Because that's the hardest period in terms of people making assumptions about things.
And it happens again if there's a time lag between when you change your name and when you get a court order to change your gender.
Right.
In my state. So that can have positive effects. Now, the permitless carry is a double-edged sword. I am not a policy expert.
Right.
I just have a lot of experience with guns carrying. I've been carrying since 2009. I've deployed 3 times and had a weapon on me at all times during all of those deployments. So weapons are familiar. I also worked in an arms room for 2 years. So
I do think that's valid for you to say, here's a law that tends to be unpopular, but here's how it benefited, as a member of a marginalized group, there was a specific benefit to you. And the threats against trans people in the US are real. I just want to make that clear that that's not an academic thing. There are real, I mean, we're getting some of it up here, but it's not nearly as imminent. Yeah. So I want to use that to pivot back to your personal story and why you came to the decision that you had to lock the guns up for a while. But as that music's saying, we need to take a break. So hold on, we're talking with Aquila from the Bubbleheads about mental health and guns, and any questions, comments, suggestions, anything, nottherapyshow.com or at Not Therapy Show, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. We'll be back on It's Not Therapy after this break. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We are still talking with Aquila from the Bubbleheads, my facilitators in the It's Not Therapy online community. And before the break, we were getting back into the point Aquila realized that she shouldn't be carrying a gun for a while, even though she's a gun owner. You've gotten a sense of her. So let's pick up there. The emotions / logic stuff with mental health, it's everywhere. It's not just about guns, but guns pull it into sharp focus because of that suicide risk. The reality that suicide by firearm is more likely to be, and this is where language sucks, successful, than, because there just isn't enough intervention time compared to overdose, where somebody can have, their stomach pumped or something like that. A bullet's a bullet, right? So how, as somebody who's been through it, how do we thread the needle of when someone is in active trauma, when someone is having a mental health situation that makes them feel unsafe? How do you logic over that and say, this thing that makes me feel safe needs to go away now?
So, if you're the one going through the crisis, you're not going to have the mental bandwidth to make that distinction.
Right, exactly.
I feel like I'm a pretty hardy individual, and it took someone that I deeply trust to tell me, hey, something's not right. I need you to do this. And it wasn't directive. It came from a place of love. I trusted that request came from a place of love and concern. And this is where we start to pull in all of those, identifiers. In media, including news and YouTube and whatever else, there are preconceived notions of what makes someone own a gun. It's like, oh, you're crazy, whatever. Whether they are or not is immaterial when it comes to a mental health crisis. You need to have the base of trust, that base of, I love you, I'm concerned for you. It is that human connection that makes the difference. And, if you have somebody in your orbit that owns a gun, learn, approach it. One way you can do it is say, hey, I see you're buying a gun. Cool. Can I learn about this with you? I don't like guns. I need to understand them.
Right.
And I need to understand your relationship with them so that I can be there for you if you need it. And if
That,
you're consistently taking that approach, that's how you build the trust. It's not going to come easy. It's not going to come fast. It has to be a sustained, consistent effort over time. Now, in the US, there's an organization called Hold My Guns.
yeah.
And they work with gun shops so that people can legally store their firearms without any judgment,
Yeah.
while they're going through a crisis, whether it's, they want to kill themselves, whether they want to, they're going through a divorce, their child is having a mental health emergency, and that's its whole own world of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be mature about this. And unfortunately, because of all the charged rhetoric around guns that I've encountered, it's super difficult to make that. And so, and it's really prevalent in the veteran community.
Yeah.
There was a rule in under the Obama administration that if a veteran was having any sort of mental difficulty, they automatically lost their guns. And when you're in the profession of arms,
Oh.
that becomes part of the identity.
Yep.
And when it's that ingrained, and you're saying, and you're demanding, give me your guns, you're not all that trust. You could have spent years, decades
Mm-hmm.
building that trust. It's all gone in an instant, and you will never get it back.
And that's true, not just about guns. It's about anything. It's about, well, I mean, I come into this with video games. They think that, oh, a kid's got a gaming addiction, which is not established as an actual addiction. Compulsive gaming could be a bunch of things. We're still not entirely sure, but if they take it away, you demolish the trust. It's the exact same thing. If there's a young person who is struggling, understanding their interests instead of condemning them is the way to get them to listen to you long term, not creating an adversarial relationship. It doesn't work, period. But again, we see all these stories of people held up as heroes because they went in and coercively took something away from somebody that was giving them a sense of comfort. It doesn't work, but we keep replicating it again and again and again. And like you said, laws are made on it, policies are made on it, and it's ineffective. So we've got a couple minutes left. What is your suggestion about what we do of this with the background? I have to do due diligence because people are going to ask. You can't guarantee people are forming bonds, forming loving, trusting relationships. And I mean, the big point with people now is mass shootings and the whole loner profile of people who do that. So what do we do?
You talk to your friends about their guns. They will give you clues if they have an unhealthy relationship with their weapon.
And what do those clues look like?
Um, you know, images on social media are going to be a big clue.
Okay, so those are unhealthy, the people who are treating it as a...
Not necessarily. They're they're taken in context. If someone's making violent rhetorical statements on social media and they're posing with their gun, particularly if they're all kitted out in tactical gear, that, to me, that might be a more of a red flag.
Okay.
How are they storing it?
Okay.
Particularly if they have children in the house. Is there a culture of safety? Do they have a sense of that the right or the privilege of owning deadly force is also a responsibility? Now, this is my own personal, I don't speak for any organization. This is just my lived experience. So, if they have a culture of responsibility between them and their weapons, and they treat them with due care that deadly force, should have, okay, maybe if they post a picture on social media, it's maybe not as much of a red flag. But
if you go over there and the gun's lying out unsecured, that's a sign of a big problem.
If it's unsecured, look at their other parasocial relationships. Are they getting in with organizations like Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, the 3%ers, the Adam Waffen? Those organizations, that might be a red flag.
Okay. I think that, that one kind of obvious. Yeah.
But it's like the gun itself is not the red flag. It's what is the context in which the gun exists in their life.
Yeah,
that's going to be the red flag.
There's more and more instances of people doing similar things that people do with guns, with vans, with cars, with construction equipment, farm equipment. Yeah.
And if you feel like you see a red flag, do a gut check.
Yeah.
Go to your friend, if they're actually your friend, and say, hey, this is what I see, but what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll know, if you invested the time to get to know them, if they're trying to evade.
Right.
So if you get an evasive answer and you're really feeling that fear in the pit of your gut, go to the authorities. Say, hey, I'm seeing this. This is all the context. And then you've done due diligence.
Right.
If law enforcement fails, that's on them.
And people who say, well, they'll hate me if they do that. My attitude is, well, at least they're alive.
There's no guarantee of that, depending on where they are and what are the circumstances.
Well, yeah,
but at least you're alive, because
that's true too.
A lot of the mass shootings that we see here in the United States are accompanied by the suicide of the shooter. We used to call it suicide by cop.
Yeah.
So,
well, they also often the event starts with off-site with the attack on a family member.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. And I know that sounds glib, but when you're trying to positively affect a situation where deadly force is going to be employed, are the lives worth the lack of relationship? Because if they're saying, get the F out of my face, then they don't value you the way you value them. So the relationship is already gone. What have you got to lose by doing the right thing?
Yeah. That's a hard truth, but it is a truth. So, I mean, building trust, it's hard. It's even harder in this incredibly, I mean, you can't even say polarized anymore, the environments on so many political and cultural issues, and guns is a big one. But I think that building trust benefits everybody, gun owner, non-gun owner, pro-gun, anti-gun, whatever. So we're going to talk with Aquila from the Bubbleheads, my It's Not Therapy community facilitators, after the break on It's Not Therapy. Any questions, suggestions, anything at all, nottherapyshow.com on the web, and then at Not Therapy Show, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. Be back in a bit. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Liana Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. We're in our final moments on this episode on guns and mental health. And I'm feeling like we just scratched the surface, even though it's been very emotional and very informative. I've learned a lot today, and let's see how much more we can get done today, and we only have a couple minutes left, but I feel like think that I'd be irresponsible to not talk about that component, and we could do a whole show on this, but trust and respect and all that stuff. How do you get that? How do you build that based on your own experiences in a world where it's trendy for people to just scream each other? People use divisive rhetoric and they don't realize how divisive they are. So where's the starting point from backing away from that cliff?
So talk to them like you would talk about a video game that you're interested in, that they're super into.
Oh, okay.
You know, if somebody is absolutely into cars and you have no interest in cars, you're like, okay, hey, help me out. What is it about these cars that's so fascinating? Let them show the excitement.
Unplug from judgments. It sounds like what you're saying. Like, instead of going, you should like that, you shouldn't like that. Why do you like that?
Yeah, you have to set aside the judgment and try and look at them as a person, regardless of whether they own a gun, carry it, or whatever. They're still a person.
Right. Well, I think we need more discussion about what that actually means. But Aquila, thanks so much for coming on and talking about what is obviously a tough, deeply personal, and sometimes uncomfortable topic, because I think we really do need to talk about it. And the legislative classes are failing us on this point. And so the only thing left is each other. So do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I'm here because lives are on the line, both in my community as gun owners and the community at large. I want to thank you for the gift of your time and your listeners' time, because it's necessary that we build bridges.
All right, Aquila, thanks so much. I hope everybody listening enjoyed this show as much as I did. I mean, I learned a lot. nottherapyshow.com, nottherapyshow.com, or nottherapyshow on Twitter and Instagram if you want to send a comment or suggest a topic for a future episode. Drop me a line. Until then, stay safe, build bonds, connect with people, and you know what I'm going to say? You're crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. Talk next time.